Podcasting 2.0 for November 6, 2020, episode 10, now entering phase 2. Yeah, Friday, once again. Dark in Austin, Texas. Winter is a-coming. And not one, not two, but 3 remote feeds today as we start with the dev down south, Dave Jones, everybody.
What could possibly go wrong? 3 feeds.
3
over
feeds, yeah.
Crazy Wi-Fi.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
So we've got Dave Jones, and we have 2 guests with us today who will be joining us for the show. We've got Tom and Kevin from Buzzsprout. Guys, how you doing?
Doing well.
Yeah, glad to be here.
All right, excellent. This is Podcasting 2.0, where we are shepherding in a new era of podcasting. And before we really get underway, and we're going to, kind of do this whole show with Tom and Kevin and talk about how things are, where we're at with namespaces, and also get a little insight into their company, Buzzsprout, and get their ideas, because that's really what this has all been about on podcastindex.social, where we've really had an amazing hive mind of ideas and development. But we have a development of our own. Dave, you've got some, you've been kind of in and out the past week.
Yeah. This is like the press release here for the fact that I've had, I was COVID positive
there
on Sunday.
Yeah, we got, this just in, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah.
COVID positive Sunday. I felt like I was floating above my own body for about 3 days.
Oh man.
Yeah, it sucked. I went to bed Saturday. I went to bed Saturday night feeling great. We took the kids out for the trick or treats and all that, and everything was awesome. And we had some dinner with friends, and then I wake up Sunday morning and I was like, oh crap, I feel horrible. And by that afternoon, I was running a high fever, and I got tested, and it was like, yeah, you got Rona. And so it was about 3 days of 102 fever. But I'm over the hump. I'm good. But that's why I was sort of in and out, not making much sense or anything on the.
No, you weren't making any sense. You were showing up at odd hours. And I knew what was going on.
That could have gone sideways.
And a couple of times I was going to say, Dave was taking it easy today. I'm like, I don't know. I didn't know how to tell everybody without telling them.
Yeah, I had no idea. I was messaging you in the GitHub saying, "Is there a problem with my pull requests? Why aren't they being accepted?"
Yeah. Why are you lazy piece of crap not approving this pull request?
But it's understandable, because the last thing you need on it's like have everyone sending you messages, DMs, how you doing, how you feeling, is it true, are you dying, are you dead, all that stuff.
Yeah, I was trying to avoid that, because I was just like, well, I'll just tell everybody on the show, but I'm good. I'm still like foggy and kind of weird headed, but I'm on the firm upswing here, so we beat it.
Nice.
Beat the Rona.
Now we're very happy to have you here, Dave.
I'm happy to be here.
So we've got Tom and Kevin from Buzzsprout, who have been part of the podcastindex.org project for a while. They have one of the larger hosting companies for podcasts in the U.S., maybe the world. I'm not sure exactly what size, but they've really been incredibly open and helpful and progressive, dare I say, in a forward-leaning type of way, to really move things along and get stuff, just get stuff implemented and adopted. And from my personal point of view, as we talked about on the last show, it's really hard when you're in kind of this catch-22 chicken and the egg situation, where you have features coming out and no one can really test them because the commercial companies have to go slower, have to make choices, have to decide what they're going to support, etc. But there's really no other tools. And, so I've been out there stomping my foot and messing up all my feeds multiple times. And finally things are starting to come into view. And you guys at Buzzsprout have really been very, as I said, really leaning forward, moving forward with some of this namespace adoption, which I'm really grateful. Dave and I are both grateful for. But I think it would be great if we could get a little introduction to the two of you and how you started, how Buzzsprout got started. Just any background I think would be good.
Yeah, I'll jump in and then I'll let Tom tell the story. I'm Kevin Finn, partnered up with Tom Rossi. Who knows how many years ago now? Probably close to 14. I always try to remember how old my daughter is because she was an infant when we first started up the company. We started in 2006, stumbled into podcasting in 2009 because we were doing like website builder stuff. And a bunch of people were saying, hey, I have these audio files. We're working a lot in the nonprofit space. A lot of nonprofit people like churches and other stuff. They create a ton of audio content and they couldn't figure out an easy way to get it online. So Buzzsprout was born out of us, starting with, hey, here are some, like, you don't know that they're called podcasts, but they are called podcasts, and here's ways to host them. And then them coming back and telling us, well, that's too difficult. And then us creating help articles for other people's software and them saying it's still too difficult. And us just saying, all right, we got to make a tool that makes this easier. And so we got into podcasting, introduced our existing customers to podcasting, and then slowly and surely podcasting kept getting more and more exciting, and we started getting more and more interested in it. And at this point, it's pretty much the main thing that we work on. It's pretty much all we do. And I want to say, what is it, like 2016, Tom, 2017? Podcasting started really exploding, and we launched our own shows. We started launching a ton of content around podcasting and have just kind of gone all in and fallen in love with the independent, open podcasting space.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Well, yeah, just that's it. That's how we got here. I think it speaks a lot to what Buzzsprout is. It came out of a place of making podcasting accessible to people who it was not accessible to because they didn't understand what's an RSS feed. What is a podcast? They didn't even know what that was. And so making it really clear, look, this is a way for you to get your message out to as many people as possible, to the people that it might be hard for them to hear from you. This provides a mechanism for you to be able to do that. And that was where we were born out of and where it continues to drive us today.
Yeah, what I like about the Buzzsprout story and what I noticed, I signed up and became a customer, and then you kindly refunded me my money. That wasn't necessary, but it's appreciated. And I immediately saw how, and this is the roots of the company. I understand that immediately now. You came from a place of trying to help people understand what the hell they're doing and wound up making tools for it, but you never stopped with the education part. And I think that's part of that's your Sproutcast, your Buzzcast. It's a lot of the documentation. I believe Melissa was, I got an email from her I had a support question. I get regular emails with kind of industry stuff. It's a role that I think is very good. Is this something that other hosting companies, do they do this kind of stuff as well? Is this a general role that podcast hosting companies fulfill in the ecosystem?
I think it's a little bit of both. Yes and no. I would say that there has been a bit of, podcasting is technology, and it can be intimidating for people who aren't into it and aren't excited about learning all the ins and outs of technology. There are a lot of people who just have a message that they want to get out to the world, and they need somebody to help make that easy for them. Mm-hmm. And so they're not necessarily interested in learning how to compress an audio file or learn how to hook up an audio interface or learn how to do all this stuff. But if you can make it fun and engaging and, remove those barriers of entry for them, then they've got a message that's just as valid as somebody else who's into all the tech. They just need a simple way to be able to do it. Right. And we think there's a difference between, just downloading an app and talking into your phone while you're driving around in your car with your friend and somebody who really wants to put a professional touch or professional podcast together. We think there's still an opportunity for them to be able to do a professional show and take it seriously, but not necessarily have to go get a degree in audio engineering and spend, $5,000 in tech stuff to be able to do it. And so that's where our education stuff comes in, is that we want to lower those barriers of entry. As to the question of, do other hosts do it? Some do, some don't. Some it definitely feels like this is they take the approach of, hey, if you're not all in and you don't want to learn everything, then this might not be the right thing for you. You have to control every little bit of it. And then there's other people, like the Anchor app is on the other end of that spectrum, which is like just download the app and talking to your phone. And then that's a fine podcast too.
Right.
So we're kind of in the middle there.
And what are your roles in the company?
So this is Kevin, and I do more like product development, like front end stuff. And then Tom leads our entire technical side, which I'll just call it technical side. Tom will tell you all the details of it.
Yeah, Tom, what the hell does that mean?
All the goodness. Yeah. Dude, Kevin's good at dreaming up stuff, and then I make it happen. That's a better picture.
Okay.
Oh, that sounds like a familiar relationship.
Tom meet Dave. Kevin meet Adam. Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
We can commiserate. I'm familiar with this relationship.
Yeah, except I can't do code if my life depended on it, other than an Apple script I did 16 years ago. So
this is where
what is it?
I get very excited when I check in a commit to the GitHub. I really want it accepted because I rarely write code, and so once in a while I get to update a document or something. I'm like, I want to see my picture in there.
Oh, I see. It's a dopamine hit. That's what you mean.
That's what it is. That's what it is.
Got you.
So Dave,
you said that y'all are mostly, y'all had organic growth, and y'all are mostly I think that's the term you used, mostly podcasts now. I mean, like, when did you decide, or when did you begin to consider yourself to be a podcasting company rather than a web company or whatever your origins were?
Yeah. Well, we launched Buzzsprout in 2009, and at the time it was just like a sister product to this, our larger product, which was this content management system for nonprofits. And Tom, help me out and remember here, but I want to say it was within a year or two that product Buzzsprout started outperforming the content management system. And so it was a pretty easy transition for us at that point of saying, hey, we're on to something here. And at the same time, there were a lot of new companies popping up in that, website builder space that had larger teams and more funding, and they were doing a really good job. Tom and I have never been super interested in solving problems that other people were already solving really well. Like, we don't just want to jump into a market just because we think there's an opportunity there. Like, we wanted to really get into a space where we could fulfill a need that other people weren't fulfilling. And so we felt that pull more in the podcasting space than we did in the website builder space. So as soon as the product, as soon as the market started justifying us to be able to move our focus over to podcasting, we were super excited to do it.
I think it was definitely exciting because we have other products, but Buzzsprout is probably the most fun to work on because it's podcasting. And we used to just joke, like, could you imagine if one day if this product made as much as our other products? And we were very happy, when it started taking off because it's just so much fun to work with.
So I mean, I'm assuming y'all still have or I'm not going to say legacy. I hate that term, but y'all still have other stuff you're trying to support that is non-podcast related through the company, though, right?
Yeah, we have other products.
The reason I ask is because that's hard. I mean, it's hard switching. It's hard switching between two different, 2, 3, 4 different code bases. I mean, that's a challenge. I can feel your pain on that.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, especially when you're talking about podcasting. Kevin said this, I don't know, a couple months ago, and it really resonated with me. But he was talking about the fact that we are a product development company that got into podcasting. Like, our core competency is being able to take complicated things and making it accessible to people, making it understandable. And all of our products, they're all in that space of making things easy for people, helping them do those things, rather than being a podcasting company that got into technology. We were a technology product company that got into podcasting.
What other products do you have, just for my edification?
Oh, they're all over the place. So we have our content management system, which, believe it or not, we still have. I think we have less than 100 customers, but we still have people on that product. We have one that's in the time tracking space called Tick, which is time tracking for people to track time against budgets. We have one in the medical space called Stream Care, which helps physicians run their own in-office pharmacy. And we have Donor Tools, which is a nonprofit donor management system.
Wow, you guys are like a garage full of solutions.
Yeah, yeah. We have a lot of different products. They're, all products that we've rubbed up against that we're like, man, I think we could build something here that would really add value and solve something, make it easy. Where other people are saying it's too complicated, it's too hard, we're going to get in there and we're gonna make it easy. And you can see it in Buzzsprout, but you can see it in these other areas as well.
And how do you market your podcast services? Do you just have set budgets and you have a number of places where you buy space, or I mean, I'm curious how you get the word out. Is it word of mouth?
Well, let me tell you where we started, and then let Kevin tell you where we are today. Because when we first started, it was all word of mouth. So we were working with people who were trying to solve that problem. So a lot of them were coming from our content management system, and they were struggling with it. But then they started telling people, and then as they told people, it was just organic. And we really didn't do a lot at all to grow the product. But then maybe Kevin, maybe 3-4 years ago, we started taking it very seriously and actually put in the work to grow. And then Kevin can kind of tell you how that's worked out.
Yeah. So, and we touched on this a few minutes ago, but our main path of growth has been through educational resources. So whether it be a blog post or a video we put online or a podcast or an online course that we make available for free, we want to educate people and get them excited about space and remove those barriers of entry for them. And then they're, as soon as they get to the point where they say, okay, we're ready to go. I mean, they could choose us or they could choose somebody else, but hopefully more times than not, they remember that we helped them get to this place and they at least check us out and put us up against the competition. So as far as advertising goes, we do some paid ads. I mean, I would love to get more and more out of that stuff because the more ad tech just keeps getting creepier and creepier, but it is a good channel for us.
Well, to be clear, we pay for advertising. We pay to advertise Buzzsprout. We don't make money off of, putting ads in our product.
Right. Got that.
Yeah.
It reminds me of DigitalOcean, like what you're talking about. It's like if I go into Google right now and just search for anything like how to install some product on Ubuntu 20, like 9 times out of 10, a DigitalOcean instruction tutorial article is probably going to come up, and it seems like being the tutorial people or the help people, it really does create a funnel into your product because you're helping people, you're onboarding them into the thing that they want to do to begin with, but then you have this side effect of being able of saying, oh well, while you're here, you might as well just our product is available as well. I mean, it's sort of a great route to take.
Having followed the hosting situations from day one, and just bandwidth and storage was a huge problem. And I think it might have been Libsyn who I think first was coming out with very low prices. Can you really make money off of this business is ultimately the question I want to ask. And has that changed throughout the years?
Yeah. I think, Tom, you want to take this one?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it definitely costs money to host. And that's what people have to understand, is that bandwidth and storage, even though it is much more affordable these days than it was, 10 years ago, it still costs something. And I mean, we were just talking about some of our podcasters we lose money on because they use so much bandwidth. Right, they have episodes that go viral and things like that. It's like even at a $12 a month subscription, we lose money on those. And so when people say things like, well, it should be free, you're like, well, it costs something. So somebody's got to pay for it. Yep. So how is it going to happen? How is that, how is that exchange going to take place? And so from the very beginning, we've always said, let's just be straight up. Like, you pay a monthly fee for a certain amount of storage. And if you look at our Buzzsprout pricing, we price based on hours of content. Again, because, we're targeting people that they don't understand a gigabyte of, how long is a gigabyte? Right. And so we say, well, it's so many hours, and they don't have to worry about encoding. So that way we can predict how much storage that will actually be. Because when they upload it to us, they can upload a wave, and we'll go ahead and we'll automatically encode it and optimize it and do everything that needs to happen. Most of our people don't understand Most of our
there's entire seminars that teach people how to do that stuff, and you guys are just doing it for them. That's nice.
Right. Right. And so, like Kevin was saying earlier, when you talk about other hosts, that's always been our position of, if you care, if you're the guy that wants to be able to go and, I want to actually edit my file directly, and I don't want you touching it and all those kind of things. We have some ways to accommodate that with Buzzsprout, but we might not be a good fit because you sound like somebody who you don't want a simple solution. You want to actually go build your own XML. Like, if you want to learn XML, Buzzsprout's not going to be a good fit for you.
So how did you, and by the way, Dave and I are big believers in the days of free coming to an end. And it has to end eventually. So just looking at the incredible benefit we get from podcastindex.social, there's a couple of people who do Mastodon hosting. And I found this kid in, I think, Denmark or Norway, and he's at masto.host. And for a small instance with 100 people or so, it's €9 a month. And so I set it up on that. And then we need a little more. And, we did need some search enabled. And so I don't know, now it's €29, which is fine. But, you get service and you can do whatever you want. But yeah, free is kind of over. I think people are seeing the issues. And I had no idea how prevalent tracking is in podcasting with all kinds of shenanigans that are going on. It's really quite amazing.
If you think about it, you're forced into that, right? Because they're trying to figure out, if we're going to offer this for free, we've got to figure out how to make money. And so you, as the podcaster, have no idea what strategies they're going to try to employ to monetize your content. And that's the cost of you getting it for free.
Hey, Tom, tech guys can't talk that smart. You're supposed to be in the back, man. You can't talk smart stuff like that. That's not how it works.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys saw the article, but it was a couple years ago before Anchor got acquired by Spotify, and the CEO posted a blog post on Medium or something, and he was talking about how is Anchor able to provide these services for free, and what does it really cost them to host a podcast? And they were saying, for the typical Anchor podcast, it costs them, I don't know. I mean, it was ridiculously low. It was like, $1 a month or something to host the show. And that's why they're able to do it for free. But the reality was, I just felt like, as I was reading that, it was the most disingenuous thing I had read in a long time, because you might be talking about a typical podcast that doesn't have a large reach, and that you're talking about the bandwidth cost alone. That is like 5% of the equation. You have staff, you have programmers, you have support people, you have server costs, you have an office, you got healthcare, you got taxes. Like, there's so much that goes into running a business that it's not just bandwidth is one bill out of 100 that come in every month. And so to boil it down to that, and to try to make people believe that paying for hosting is not worth it because the bandwidth bill is only $1 a month for a typical show is just terrible. Like, you've got to make up that money somewhere. Yeah. And they had raised millions of dollars, and then they sold for millions of dollars. And there's a whole nother business that's going on there. And it's like attention economy stuff and profiting off of your listener base and tracking people. And they are thinking, hey, let's build a huge audience. And at some point, we'll figure out how to monetize the creations of other people and the listeners that they attract. It's not $1 a month, guys.
Yeah. No,
that's an interesting thing. Like, I want to ask you about Anchor specifically, because I was looking at just the hosting stats, just among how many feeds each hoster has and that kind of thing. And a lot of it's just, estimates. None of this stuff is hard science here, but clearly Anchor is the big, behemoth as far as the number of podcasts. But is there any sense of how much of that is garbage and how much of it is what you would consider just like a legitimate, real podcast? I'm looking at, I don't know, is it like 650,000 shows or something like that? And is it is half of that garbage? I don't know. Do you have any sense of that?
Yeah, there are people who are trying to answer that question, like Daniel J. Lewis. He does.
I love that we have this eclectic group of people who are finding feeds and sorting through stuff and sleuthing. I'm sorry, I just needed to say how much I love that. Yeah. We got everybody on podcastindex.social. It's a gang, man. I like it.
Yeah. Yeah, so he's doing some great work and trying to figure out, like, how do we define an active podcast? Because we know that there's, hundreds of thousands of people who have probably downloaded that Anchor app and loaded it up and said, hey, this is my first podcast. I hope, everyone enjoys the show, publish, and then they never come back. Is that really a podcast? Yeah. To count that? Well, it's listed in the Apple Podcast directory, so I guess we do count it. I don't know. And so
it seems like every Anchor podcast that gets created is automatically listed in iTunes.
Yeah,
unless they copy somebody else's.
Yeah. Well,
until they do the locked feature. I mean, come on.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, until they implement it day one, right?
Well, that's probably a good segue into the namespace and how you guys heard about podcastindex.org and what you think in general of the project and your thoughts and ideas.
Well, I'll tell you, we have been internally clamoring for like something like this for a long time. We've had multiple conversations about doing it ourselves, and the problem with somebody like us doing it is that we are not. I mean, we're not independent, right? And so anything that we do, any innovation that we try to do inside of a feed, is not for the benefit of the community. At least that's not how it's viewed from our competitors. It's us trying to leverage something in the feed for a competitive advantage for our platform, which isn't necessarily aligned with our intentions, but that's just the way that it's perceived. And that's not to say anything negative about our competition. Like, we would have a hard time if they did something, we'd have a hard time just being like, oh, that's actually good for the open community. Let's jump on board. And so there's been this struggle to innovate because we're all competing with each other. And even though we see each other at conferences and we're all friendly and everything, at the end of the day, we still are trying to build the best products and then leverage those advantages to get the most customers. And so to have someone like you guys come along and say, hey, we're not a hosting company, we're not an app company, we are just people who care about the space, and we care about it remaining open, and we care about having a platform for free speech. We care about all these good things that everyone can agree on, regardless of whether you're host A or B or app C or D, doesn't matter. Let's come together and innovate, because if we don't, so these platforms are going to continue to move, and then we're going to lose podcasting to these walled gardens, and that's not good for anybody. Nobody wants that, right? And that's what's happening. That's what we're super excited about. And the only question I have at this point is, why isn't everybody jumping in here? Why isn't every podcast host participating at the level that we are?
I can tell you that. I can't speak definitively, but I can tell you that for really the only pushback that we've gotten, I think, is from sort of gatekeeper mentality. There's a sense of, and I get it. I mean, even though Adam's clearly, been in, the in the podcast space forever and invented it, but there is a sense of just a couple of guys coming in, and who are these guys? I mean, like we have boards and standards bodies and trade associations and all this kind of stuff. That
those all sound like innovator killers.
Yeah, it's exactly right. And we've come up against that in the pod. I'm sure me and you've talked through email privately, Tom, about people that have said come in and been, oh, you should do this. You should have a standard. This should be rigorous and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, well, I mean, standards bodies are fine, but we're not building HTML6 here. I mean, this is just some podcast tags, and it really shouldn't take 10 years and a 501c3 and all this kind of stuff just to get maybe 10 podcast tags.
And this was really a revelation for me as we were going down this path, and all of a sudden I just saw the problem, and I started looking into. I mean, I was on the original RSS board. And that, there was never a meeting or anything. It was just a bunch of names, and okay, fine, whatever. And I'm sure I got removed without them telling me. But it just never made any sense why nothing had moved forward. And then when I really started to look, I understood that Apple had become this behemoth, and I take that upon me, although, it is what it is, and 2020 is hindsight. I gave them the index. They kind of became the default app in general, but also the index. And so they have two pieces of the pie. They're not just an app. And without Apple's support, and they have no reason to do much more innovation. They really don't from a business perspective. And I think a lot of hosting companies were suggesting things, and but until an Apple said, "Yeah, okay, we're on board," and now it's worse. Now it has to be Apple and Spotify, and that's when Dave and I went like, "No, no. This is backwards. Come on, we're taking the index back, and we're gonna set up something that is, for all intents and purposes, immutable."
Yeah, I don't know
this
if y'all,
is something that should unify all of us that have, skin in the game for independent podcasting, whether we're hosts or players or anything like this. We should all be excited about an independent organization helping us innovate together, because we can innovate quicker than any one of these, behemoth companies that are beholden to shareholders. And so when you go and you look at what we've been able to do in a short period of time, and so there's not every player supports it and not every podcast host supports it yet, but we can quickly do these things. Let's do that. Let's make a difference in this industry much quicker than any of these other guys can.
Yeah, I don't know if y'all seen, I mean, just having looked at some of the stuff that is coming out with, with the apps that are linking up on podcastindex.social, that everybody is, implementing the things like chapters and transcripts and now sound bites. People are implementing this stuff into their apps, and then they're posting screenshots, and they're linking up where you can go and test them. And just even with those few 2 or 3 tags,
it's gotten exciting.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
God, I mean, it's such a rich experience. I mean, like you can't get the experience that you get in Podfriend or Hypercatcher or Podverse or I forgot the one that was posted last night. Somebody posted a screenshot.
Podbay.fm.
Podbay, yeah. Like those things, you can't get that experience in these silo apps right now. They're not doing that.
Hey, and you know what's happened? Something really cool happened, and I think it was partially between Hypercaster and Podfriend, and because I started posting chapters, and it became more like a slideshow. So not just a place where you tap on something to go to a time code, which is something I despise. I want people to be forced to listen to everything I say, and no shortcuts. But now it's like, now I can put a picture up, and then there's a link, and then you can click through to the link, and it's more like a multimedia presentation, which once we figure it out can be completely crowdsourced. I mean, that's it's fantastic. We're using one guy's app, David, with Hypercatcher and Hypercatcher Studio, so I can author the chapters in there. People can use his app to suggest chapters, yet it works over here on Podfriend. I mean, I don't think we've had that even in 16 years.
Yeah, that's hugely significant. And exactly what you just said about the ability for the open podcast space to innovate and do things is, I mean, it's been really, really hard. Everybody who's building stuff, I mean, it's not easy to build this stuff. Sometimes it takes large teams. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of risk that goes into it. And then we've talked about this plenty of times. It's the chicken or the egg problem. And so who is going to, lay the first egg and hope that a chicken comes along and sits on it, or wherever that analogy goes from there.
I like it.
Yeah. For years, we could have put tons of stuff into the RSS tag, but again, that would take us time. It would take us development time. It would cost us money to do that. And
also, if there's no apps out there to use it, I mean, you can't even get I mean, I have 800,000 to 1 million downloads a week, and so when I mess something up, it's monstrously cool. I mean, people have double episodes. They've got wrong album art showing up, and that's all on me, because I just hack away. And I'll get it right eventually. And people know me by now. And I spend a lot of time on Twitter saying, "Oh, could you please resubscribe?" But once you bring users in, and you guys are going to be, will be, amongst the first to have users that are taking advantage of a lot of these authoring tools. And there's others out there. I mean, for sure, we've got, I think, Castapod, who is a kind of like a self-host situation. They're implementing tags. I think the namespace has been implemented by 3 or 4. locked tag, which is small, but it recognizes the namespace. I think that's a big deal. What is on your roadmap?
Well, let's get into the roadmap in 1 second. I would say, what I'm excited about is that the people who are participating the most right now in what's happening in the Podcast Index are smaller apps and smaller hosts. We're one of the bigger ones that are jumping on, but again, because I think we've just been wanting this for so long, we're super excited about it, and we have the team size that we're just able to do it. But for some reason, some of the larger hosts are being a little bit more reluctant, and so maybe they're waiting to see, what's the adoption on this stuff. So this is just a shout out to anybody listening to the show. Like if you host with somebody, a larger host or somebody who's not on board with this stuff, you need to reach out to them and let them know that you want to use these tags for your show, that you're excited about, not just like the locking tag and things like protecting your show, which is super important, but also, hey, I need transcripts in my show. I need chapter markers in my show. I want, host and guest images in my show. All the stuff that's happening right now. I don't know what's going on with some of the big guys, but it seems like they're sitting back and waiting for who knows, maybe we finalize the tag the 15th and then they jump in.
In 1981, there was a campaign that was similar to this. It went like this: call up your cable company and say, I want my MTV.
That's right. Yes.
That's it.
I love that.
And you know what's great about this? This is the part that can't be overlooked. Because right now I've sent a tweet out once or twice for people to do some chapters in Hypercatcher, and so I get some feedback through there. But once you have cool new features that you're authoring as a podcaster, what you're going to do is you're going to say, and this is what I fully intend to do once I have the workflow down, is on my show, I'll say, hey, check out these 5 apps, or I've made a page. You can, or go to this place on podcastindex.org, and you can see all these new features. Now, this drives listeners who say, either they don't care, or, okay, this is nice, and maybe they like the app and some other features, and that in turn drives them towards because I've been in this game from the beginning. I get, like, the chapters thing. Comic strip blogger has been, I've known him for a long time. He is my personal troll and CIA handler. I'm not quite sure which comes first. And he has been telling me I'm an idiot for not doing chapters for years and years and years. People will hound podcasters to add features, to author features. I never saw the benefit of it because it couldn't be crowdsourced. And now, of course, I have that. So it fulfills itself. The marketing of these features, if they're worth their salt, will propagate very quickly. So, when you get podcasters knocking at your door saying, hey, I'd like these features, that's the time to listen. And I think that's going to happen in kind of a snowball fashion, once we get some more things implemented, these chapters, and which you guys are already doing, right? You already have chapters and captions.
We've had chapters for years in the MP3.
Yeah, right.
And so now we've included them in the RSS feed using the spec that was adopted in Podcast Index.
Yeah, beautiful.
But I think what gets me excited are the things that are new. Like transcripts are brand new, whereas you could do chapters before, but transcripts are brand new. So when you go and you look at like Podcast Addict or Podfriend or one of these guys that's actually showing the words while you're listening,
it's fun.
That's amazing. And when you look at the sound bites, the idea that Kevin really put forward, this idea that the podcaster can say, hey, if you're thinking of listening to this episode, here's a 30-second clip that might sell you on why you should, listen to the whole thing. Something like that, it can be a massive feature. But it takes the host, the podcaster, and the app working together to make that happen.
Yeah.
The soundbite idea is hopefully a solution to prevent us from having to go down the road of algorithms. Like people talk about podcasts having a discoverability problem all the time, right? And I feel like that's just asking for trouble, right? Like if you want somebody to solve discoverability, they'll build an algorithm that'll solve discoverability. But you know what it's going to do? It's going to figure out what you're susceptible to and what holds your interest, and it's going to start feeding you that same garbage all the time.
Totally.
Didn't Spotify just change the compensation with their musicians?
I read that,
Yeah. And so the idea being, if there's an algorithm controlling what's being put in front of you is, hey, listen to this next. If there is some dollar attached to it, then they're obviously going to push the thing that isn't necessarily the best thing for you to listen to, but the thing that's going to make them the most money. And so I love the idea of a way around algorithms as a way to solve that discoverability issue.
And so we've seen two versions of that that I like very much. One is and I always forget the name. Dave, help me. Cast coverage, castcoverage.com, which dumps you into random episodes, a random spot in the feed. And I laughed my ass off. And from time to time, actually use the Podfriender feature of Podfriend, which is it's like a Tinder. And literally a podcast pops up and you swipe left and it's gone. You swipe right and it's added to your favorites. And I've used that a lot, and just looking at album art and listening to a little bit. Oh, I'll check that out. I mean, so discoverability is taking place in different ways. I think the biggest thing that we're coming up against now is, how do we make a lot of these audience participation features? How do we make them work across apps? So, because really, what YouTube has over podcasting is the chat on the sidebar, where everybody can jump in and chat along, and they've got all kinds of funky features you can use there. Comments that work across the system. This is where we're lacking, and any centralized silo is always going to have a leg up initially to be able to provide that. And I think that's where, to me, human beings are still great AI, and they will recommend the right things to the right people, or at least your AI and your brain will know, avoid this guy's suggestions. Those are the things that I think that we can really excel at if we figure out some of those issues.
Yeah, I think the algorithm problem is just never. You can't solve things always with an algorithm. You can't. For instance, there's no way a music prediction algorithm is there. I'm a huge Rush fan, and so there's always going to be this prediction in the algorithm that says, oh, you like Rush, so you're going to like this other power trio. Well, the fact is, I don't like any of those. I mean, there's just something unique about that one band that I like that you can't quantify. You cannot put it into any parameters which properly inform an algorithm. And I think it's the same way with podcasting. Like I heard, I think it was Marco Arment talking a few weeks ago. He said what people follow in podcasts is not like information or guests necessarily, or blah, 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 blah. What they follow are personalities. So like it's like, I want to listen to Adam's podcast, or I want to listen to, Kevin's podcast. It's like you get connected to where you feel like you feel like you have a connection to the host, and you begin to follow that person's podcasting, and like you can't necessarily quantify that into any sort of algorithm that's going to make a prediction engine that feels right.
A good A/B comparison for algo, non-algo is Twitter and podcastindex.social. So podcastindex.social, although things are obfuscated from view for you, depending on who you're following, you can always pretty much start at the top, and then eventually you wind up, oh, I've already seen this, and then you're done. Whereas on Twitter, it's like shit's popping up from 8 hours ago. It's like, oh, what is this? It's a reply. Everything is weighted the same. It's not, it's not threaded properly. And right. I find a lot of signal to noise on the Mastodon server is high, man. I get a lot out of that.
Yeah. I mean, two totally different goals of those platforms, right? The Mastodon server, the goal is to give people a place to communicate information. So I go there, I caught up on my information, and then I'm done. The goal of Twitter is to keep me on that site as long as possible. So like you want
the most profitable way possible
and never end. Like they will always find something new to show me.
Yeah. What do y'all?
I was just saying they want to keep you on the platform in the most profitable way, right? Not only do they want to keep you on there, but they want to put the stuff in front of you that's going to make them the most money. And that's where it's fine tuning an algorithm is first they're going to get you addicted, and then they can start turning the screws to make sure that the stuff that they're putting in front of you makes the most money for them.
That's the YouTube philosophy when they switched from clicks or likes to engagement time.
And that's where like I don't even want to argue the validity of algorithms being better at finding stuff or not, because even if they solve that problem, at the end of the day, the motivation is different. Like Kevin was saying, the motivation of YouTube is not to educate you. It's not to find the content. It's to keep you on the platform in the most profitable way possible.
So, well, then I'll ask this question to you specifically then, Tom. Like the biggest, to me, clearly we have, Podcast Index. We're doing, we're trying to do two things. We're trying to be an independent directory of podcasts, so that Apple is not the center of the universe. And that's not nothing against Apple. They've been great stewards of podcasting. It's just that it shouldn't be that way. It really just shouldn't. And the other thing is running the API to try to give small podcast apps the ability to boot up without having to launch 30 servers in a back end somewhere. So like those are really the two goals of the index, and what we spend our money and time on. And so the biggest, mostly that is running well, and it's doing, clearly there's always bugs and we're always fixing things, but I mean, there's a couple of things that are really just kind of on a technical level challenging. And one of those things is search ranking. And I spend a lot of mental cycles on this, of how to get good search ranking without having to fall back to the popularity scores of big silos and scraping and this kind of stuff, because number one, I don't really trust some of their numbers. Clearly, like Spotify, for instance, they said that Michelle Obama was their, top podcast. Okay, well, maybe, but then they opened it up and made it not exclusive anymore, which that makes me not trust those numbers. So if you're just scraping popularity out of silos and saying, okay, well, these are, and I'm going to weight my ranking in the index that same way, I don't like that. I don't think that's accurate. I feel like there needs to be something more organic and something more decentralized, but I have not landed on anything. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think you're going into it with the goal of putting the algorithm together in such a way to accurately represent what's going on. And just having that goal is different than somebody like a Spotify, who, again, their goal is to make money. And I think it's not a bad thing. They have to make money. They're a company. But for Podcast Index, it's a nonprofit, it's an independent organization. We're trying to solve this in a different way, value for value. And so I think it's not necessarily what the solution is right now. It's that's the goal, and that's what we're trying. And there's going to be whatever we come up with right now is going to change in a month or 6 months or a year. It's going to continue to iterate. But the goal is not going to be convoluted with money.
Yeah. Yeah, because when people search for things, so like podcast, let's just take plenty of apps to use our search now. When they search for things, clearly there's a need for some sort of ranking or weighting or popularity to inform the rank, inform the results, the order, but I don't want to get caught into this trap of, oh well, these other silos want this is how they've ranked it, because I just can't trust that.
You can't trust
I can't trust that, but I don't. But then you don't want to necessarily just discard it and say, well, it's of no value whatsoever. I'm trying to find this middle ground between trusting the algorithms and having zero algorithm at all, which also does not work.
Right, because you got to do something.
Yeah. Have you approached it from the perspective of like where Google started off, and years and years ago, they came up with this idea of PageRank, where they would start scoring pages based on somebody searches for this term and then they click on this page. How long do they stay on that page, or do they come back and search for something else? And the longer they would stay on that page, or if that would end their session, then they knew that was a pretty strong result. And so they'd start promoting it and giving it higher and higher page rank. It's evolved massively since then, but that's the basis of kind of where they started, right?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, giving people a way, so when they hit your index and they do a search and you give back these results, then also giving them a way to filter back. Hey, okay, the person clicked on the third result that you showed me, and then they ended up listening to an episode or subscribing to that podcast. So just let me know that. I don't need to know anything about who this person is, but let me know that the third result was the result that they were actually looking for. So then I can know to prioritize that for this keyword going forward.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because because you don't necessarily want, just a raw input where it can be, I guess, gamed or misunderstood, where it's just like, okay, well, I'm piping all the clicks into this one score. You need an extra like arbitration layer there. No, I like it. Yeah, I like that. It's a good place to start. And the other thing, now that we actually have some apps, it's a little easier than it was at the beginning, because at the beginning we had zero inputs whatsoever. I mean, it was just like there was nothing there. And so, I mean, like now that we have some apps and we actually have some inputs, the initial algorithms worked out pretty good. Just doing search misses. It's like, okay, well, somebody searched for this, and so now let's rank up those things. But I think it's time to take the next step. I appreciate that advice.
Yeah, I mean, I really don't like the idea of charts, or especially charts from, like walled garden silos, influencing search at all. With search, there's intent. There's always a right answer. Somebody's searching for something because they're looking for something. And even if I'm looking for a broad category, I could type in baseball. I'm still looking for, a specific baseball podcast that is talking about Little League baseball or something, even though I might have just typed in baseball. But there's answers to these questions. And the answer to what are the most popular podcasts in the world is by saying, tell me the most popular podcasts in the world. It's not by going to a search and typing something in, right? It's like, show me the chart. And so search, I feel like, should be a very different, like problem solution than just going to the charts or using chart data to influence our search results.
I don't think, as far as like search and discoverability, they're really different things. I don't know how y'all feel about that, but like discoverability, you don't, I think it's rare to discover a podcast through a search. I think search is to find something you already have an idea that you're looking for.
Right.
Discoverability seems like a different animal to me.
And I'm sure that we have some search gurus who will be listening, who will jump in. And we always encourage everybody to come to podcastindex.social, because that's where a lot of these things are fleshed out. And then, of course, the good stuff moves off to the GitHub. That's where I stop. I'll check. I'll check in once every, like, maybe every 3 days, see what Daniel J. Lewis has posted.
Yeah.
It's always fun to read. He's got interesting ideas. So to bring it back to the podcasting 2.0, Dave, we have the namespace phase 1 locking down November 15th, if I'm correct.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, I don't know how Tom and Kevin feel, but I feel like it's pretty much come into clarity now. I think we have a pretty good finish line in front of us.
Yeah, I think we're super excited. We can't wait for the 15th, because I mean, at the 15th, we're locked. We have a spec. Like, everyone get your apps together, get on board, start implementing this stuff, get everyone excited, get your audience members excited about these new things. Like, hey, here's my podcast now. And it does not just my podcast, also has my picture and the picture of the guest that was on there.
So what are the tags that are good to go for phase 1?
The transcript, the locked, funding, chapters, soundbite, and then the one that we're working on right now is person.
Ah, yes, right. And could someone explain to me the use case of soundbite? Because I've kind of missed that conversation.
Sure. I mean, I think about soundbite as, I mean, you remember what is it, 80s, 90s? You drive into a new town and you don't know any of the radio stations, and you hit that scan button on your FM radio.
Yeah.
And you're like, show me all the cool stations in this town.
You had FM, huh? Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's one use case. You could use it like that. You could say, hey, I'm looking for a new sports podcast. And now we go ahead, we play all these 30, 45, minute and a half sound bites from anybody who's pushing sound bites out.
So
I got to commit 45 minutes.
This is a, so the way, I just want to understand how to use it. So I use it by saying, here's a clip, and I guess you can have more than one, but here's a clip from this show, and that just goes as an additional tag as if it were, that's for discoverability, so someone can just preview and listen to something from the show, and I've determined what that is. Is that correct?
Right. So you as the creator, you say, hey, this episode's 2 hours long, but at 23 minutes and 30 seconds, here's a 45-second soundbite that's really fun and interesting. So if you want to kind of get a flavor for the show, just listen to this 45 seconds, and then after that, you can decide if you want to subscribe or listen to the whole thing or whatever. And there's another good one later on. And
so how does that function? Do I have to clip an actual soundbite, or is it a piece from the file? What is the? I have not followed the tag, so I'm not sure.
Piece from the file. Yeah, it's a piece from the file. It's not
just a time. It's just a timestamp and a duration.
Oh,
yeah, you just say
that's beautiful.
At 45 seconds, play a 30-second clip, and that's the soundbite that we want to be able to highlight for that episode.
I like that. Whose idea was that?
That's Kevin.
It came from Buzzsprout. We've been letting people create sound bites for their podcasts for years, but then we had nothing to do. Like, we couldn't stick them in the RSS feed because no apps were doing it. And
right.
Competitors would poo-poo it if we said everyone should be doing this. So we just created little video files, and we're like, share them on your Twitter, share them on your Facebook, whatever you want to do with them. Now that we have this, we're like, oh my gosh, this makes perfect sense. This is where it should have been all along.
Yeah.
That makes sense. We're, I don't know if y'all saw what I started putting in soundbite support in the index aggregators last night. And as soon as it's done, one of my first use cases for the index is going to be just a new API endpoint where it just says recent sound bites or sound bites by category, and it just basically just be a stream of the latest sound bites that are discovered. I think that's basically like your scan button.
But you got to have some buffering and stuff, don't you? How the hell does that work? Can you do an HTTP request straight into the file at a certain point, or how does that work?
Yeah, you can, because of byte range requests. So you could just say, this is the file I want, and start at this byte range or whatever.
Yep. It should work, quote unquote.
And how do I author that? Are there any tools out there to do that? Well, I guess I got to just move my whole feed over to Buzzsprout. What the hell, man? It's like, I just need to. You want to take my traffic? I'll do it for $12 a month. I think that's a good deal for me.
I bet you do.
Yeah, it's only a terabyte and a half of traffic. It's not a big deal.
I bet someone at Buzzsprout saw me sign up. They're like, "Oh crap! Oh no! We can't have that guy bringing his stuff over here. No." Tom
messaged me. He said, Adam just signed up. I upgraded him to free. I was like, oh my gosh, we're going to lose it on this one.
Well, hey man, Steve Jobs did it for me the first time around, so you're in good company. He upgraded my Mac drive to let me do all this stuff. So, Dave and I talked about this before we started the show, because we wanted to show you guys some stuff that we've been working on, and we think that it's probably in the tradition of Podcast Index to do it publicly and talk to you a little bit about what we're doing. When we started, it's always been on the website. We have two main missions. One, preserve podcasting as a platform for free speech. And I think we're well on our way to doing that. We have the index filled up. We've got people contributing, keeping. And by the way, we'll be thanking people who donated to sponsor a machine. We'll be thanking you on the next episode. It is to a degree self-sustaining. Dave's not getting paid. I'm not getting paid, but that's not the point. It's running, and I think we are. Seeing the adoption and people adding us now as an option for search and into their apps, and some big ones too. Like Podcast Addict, which is really nice. And seeing all this plethora of new apps coming online with new experiences, I think we are well on our way to achieving that goal and being able to maintain it. The second part of the mission, which Dave and I were thinking about from day one, was retooling podcasting as a platform of value. And you guys are interesting because of your overall philosophy, which falls very much in line with ours. which if I could sum it up, is the days of free have to end. And I believe the podcast audiences are well primed and ready to look at a different value model than they've previously been using. When I say value model, the one that is most known that people default to is advertising. My personal view, cut down real short, is advertising is censorship, because it always leads to censorship one way or the other, probably self-censorship. And we have seen that the value for value model as deployed on No Agenda, as deployed on Podcast Index, which is really whatever you're getting out of this, put something back in, and we ask for your time, your talent, or your treasure. And a lot of people are very happy to, when it's open-ended and they can determine the value of how much they want to give back. It works a hell of a lot better than saying, tip us $5 a month. And why, I don't know, but it's true. And we saw Patreon rise, and Patreon has a lot of pros versus the cons. You know, it allows people to support media properties, support their clubs, their groups, their tribes, the podcasts that they center around. Has a lot of issues. It's clearly you can be deplatformed from it, and maybe not even deplatformed by Patreon alone, but down the line at the credit card processing. There's just a lot of different issues. So what I do know, and actually I'm going to, are you guys able to access email, Tom and Kevin?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sending you an email right now with a little presentation. And Dave, you have it in front of you?
Yeah, I got it.
So the second part of our mission, which we haven't really spoken about that publicly, is why are we doing this? You know, what is for part two, for retooling podcasting as a platform of value? Well, we really need to free podcasting from corporate control. And this is another thing that I think Kevin and Tom, you both identified this as being a very big issue. So how we're going to do that is we have to continue to have decentralized content. We have to integrate it with decentralized money. And I say decentralized money because we know that the platform for free speech is very difficult when you're using third parties and payment processors and all these different places where you can just get removed from. So we're thinking a step ahead, which is always going to take an adoption process. And what we're doing is we're building a self-sustaining ecosystem for podcasting. Do you guys have this PDF that I sent?
Yep.
Yeah, I've got it.
So if you look at the second slide, and I'll post this on the podcastindex.social. So this is the model that Dave and I looked at from the very beginning, that there are, and these are Interactive Advertising Bureau numbers. So this is just U.S. numbers. There's 100 million U.S. podcast listeners who on average listen 1 hour per day. And as some listen a hell of a lot more, some listen less, but on average, you have 100 million hours of content being consumed per day. Based on my experience over a decade with No Agenda Show, MoFax, with Podcast Index, looking at Patreon, I believe we can convert at least 1% of those 100 million listening hours per day. So 100 million people, we should be able to get 1 million people to want to pledge to a podcast instead of not pay for it or go through any other system. So I'm thinking more a model where, this show is worth something to me, and I'm just pegging that to make it simple at $1 an hour. So and I know that if I ask my listeners and I say, what is the show worth to you? They'll probably set it a lot higher than $1 per hour, but it's a fair price. And I think everybody can find themselves in that kind of range. So now you're talking about a potential daily flow of $1 million. And this is a stream of value that we have been able to capture into a self-sustaining system. And it's a mind bender. So if you're already on slide 3 and 4, you're probably going, what the hell? And Dave, jump in anytime here. So I'm going to explain what the history of what happened in the background as we were building the index. I dove in deep into digital money and how it would work and how we could basically stream that at the same time someone is streaming MP3 bits, ones and zeros. I thought it would be entertaining and interesting to see if we could stream value, some monetary value, back to the creator and back to the app you're using and anyone else who was in the chain of value that brought this program to you. And there's a new protocol that is a part of, well, it's a Bitcoin off-chain protocol called Lightning. This is developed by Lightning Labs. That is the company that Jack Dorsey funded. And this is really, I think it's been around since 2018. It is on mainnet, so it's actually working. It's functional. And there's one.
Hey, let me stop you, Adam, real quick. Just ask Kevin and Tom. I mean, how familiar are you guys with how Bitcoin and this kind of stuff works? What's your skill level there?
Mine is very high level. I mean, I've bought some Bitcoins. I played around with a few different digital currencies a little bit, but super high level. Never dug into the development side or how it all gets connected and just around.
Yeah, same here.
Okay. All right. Just checking.
So you've at least had a wallet at one point and you've had Bitcoin in it or some kind of digital currency.
Correct.
What's interesting about the Lightning protocol is it allows you to stream micropayments. So thousandth of a Satoshi. So very, very small amounts. And you can stream it directly without creating an invoice. As long as you have someone's public key, you can send it in real time. And I was looking at this. I set up a full Bitcoin node. Dave and I was doing a lot more in the beginning because Dave was focusing on keeping the databases and everything running. And once we kind of were able to really dive in and understand what's happening, we met these guys who also showed up on No Agenda Social, on podcastindex.social, and that's the guys from Sphinx Chat. And so what they have, and I always kind of knew this would happen, they kind of have a peanut butter and we're sticking our chocolate into it. They've created a chat app that is very much like WeChat. Are you familiar with WeChat, Kevin and Tom?
Yeah.
So, WeChat basically does everything. You can pay your bills. You can do all kinds of stuff with it.
And super app is what they call it.
Super app, yeah. And everything costs a little bit of money. So even sending a message to someone costs 1/100th of a penny, I think, is what the lowest denominator is. And they integrated with our help, but it was quite easy because there's so much available on the GitHub, etc., that the roadmap is there. They integrated podcasting into their app. And after we discussed the pledge idea, they now have a working proof of concept where you get the app, you go to the podcast you want to listen to, and the minute you hit play, every minute, a little bit of money is streaming off. And that money is streamed off to the podcaster with an automatic split to the podcast app they're using, and we've just set that at 1%. We thought that would be fair to start off with. The market will have to tell us what's right or wrong. The podcast index receives 1% to keep everything running, and the podcaster can then determine what other money they need to split up. So if they have a co-host, or if they have a hosting company, or if they have promoters, or if they have an investor or anybody, they can personally go in, say, okay, I want 50% of what I get to go to this person, 10% to that person, 10% to this service. And the minute someone is using that podcast app, which is chat, and it's also a digital wallet, they are actually paying directly from their wallet to all those other people in real time at the value they determine. Does that make sense?
That makes sense. That sounds like a magical future, though.
Well, the thing is,
I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around. This is huge. Yeah.
Well, so to jump in real quick, the idea here is, first of all, none of this is proprietary. None of this depends on the index to function. Anybody can, as long as you have a public Lightning node that can accept key send, you can drop, and the way this will ultimately be, come to fruition is in an open way. Is there will be a tag that will be put into the namespace that will define where these addresses and what the split percentages are. So if I'm a podcaster and I have a Bitcoin Lightning node that can accept key send payments, I'll take my node's ID and I will just construct the XML for this. We're calling it the value block or the value tag. You can drop it into your XML feed, and any podcast app that is aware of how to send key send payments can read that and immediately know where to begin streaming payments to. Now, so it's not dependent on us. We have already built support for it in a way to be able to make this a little bit easier. And so anything that comes through us, we put a 1% split in there just to help us cover our cost and to help support the index. But this is where hosting plays the role, and I think you can see that in the PDF. Is what we envision is that hosting companies will be payment hubs, essentially. That because one thing that's necessary here is to allow podcasters to have a Lightning node that can accept payments, and that in order for one of the roles for a hosting company, since you're already providing the feed services and the tools, is you could also provide Lightning nodes and spin those up, and then you take and then you get a percentage, 1 to 5%, whatever you negotiate with your customers. And so as those streaming payments are coming through, there's a percentage coming off that's getting peeled off to the hoster, and that could cover costs. That could be that could be a profit. However that plays out within your internal business.
And let me say a little bit more about this hub. So what I think will happen, and by the way, all the code for this is available. There's a GitHub. There's the code that can be dropped into existing I say it. Here's my non-developer voice. You can drop that code right into your app, and that shit will work overnight. Okay. So we know the reality of that, but there's code to make simple podcast apps that don't need to receive key send. They can just send. But the hub, because everything happens on blockchain, the hubs become super interesting for community-based features. So in the demo, we'll show you guys, and we're going to get as many people in as possible starting next week. It depends on the Sphinx chat guys, because it's their hub, their nodes, etc. They're spinning up, and we have a whole claim your podcaster wallet process set up. The hub has chat features, relay features, all these community-based features that when you see the app, they actually have a timeline, and as the podcast is running, very much like YouTube, you can chat along with people at the same time, and that is going to be on the Podcaster Hub. But obviously, because it's blockchain, that can be propagated to all hubs, which is, I think, very exciting, because these are the interactive features that we've been looking for. You can also do what we're calling a boost. So if you're listening and you hear something really cool and you just want to hit it with a little boost, you get a whole animation, and 100 Satoshis goes down the chain through all of the splits. I don't know if they've implemented it yet, but the idea is when you come back in, just like on YouTube, and you play the show again, you can see the replay of the chat, and you can add to that and participate in kind of that virtual comment/chat timeline that is just being added to with every person that comes in. I mean, all of these features are all pretty much functional today, including the ability to set how much value. We have it, I think max is 100 Satoshis now, but you can set it to 1 per minute or whatever you want. And that should be able to go higher, obviously, seeing as that 12,000 Satoshis is now $1. So you see, there's a lot of things that are going to take people getting used to. There's no doubt that there's an onboarding process for people to even have Bitcoin and understand how to get it from point A to point B. There's a ton of very well-funded companies who are doing that. But we feel this hub role, which is the last page, that is something that you guys could do, and other hosting companies as well. And just to point out, to reiterate what Dave said, just like Podcast Index, all of this, you don't need us to do this. We'd love to be included in everybody's ecosystem because we have a lot, set up and good to go, but it's, anybody can set up an index and do this. But this to me is turbocharging podcasting with a defined market, defined value stream. The same PR works. Hey, I'd be willing to give you money, Mr. Podcaster, if I can use this app with your podcast. The onboarding for that is very simple. We've got that licked, and hopefully it will feed upon itself. But what we'll need is companies that want to provide these extra services, which are all, established type of server services that are, I don't know exactly what it all entails, but I have a node running at my house. So, if I can do something, then you guys may be able to do many more of those somethings.
What would the experience look like for the listener? So the listener would need to have a Lightning node as well?
No.
They'd have to have some type of digital currency?
Yeah, so you have an app, and that app will basically just have a wallet strapped onto it, and there's code for that available already, which can be done in a web app, Android, or iOS. And once you have that set up, then essentially, once you get the value block from the RSS feed or from the index, you can immediately start participating in this, and your player, that you just hit play and it all goes. You will have
I would have to configure my player to connect to that app to be able to pull.
As an app developer, so let's take Podfriend as an example. Podfriend would function exactly the way it does today, only there would be an additional configuration where you go into your wallet so you can receive money, put money in there, and then the equivalent of subscribe to a podcast, and it'll just work. If there's no money in your wallet, it'll still work. This is a pledge. It's not a pay to play. It's actually the opposite. It's play to pay. So you've got even if the podcaster does not have a wallet set up, it'll still function as regular. But we may, or Podfriend, who would have an incentive to say, hey, you could be paying this podcaster and click here to make that happen. Because that app, Podfriend in this case, would get a 1% of the value stream for someone who's using their app to listen to the podcast.
Yeah, there's a thing we've been talking about since the beginning, and I'll try to clarify one thing. Is one of the things we've been talking about from the beginning is that app developers have been left out of the podcast ecosystem in a big way since the beginning. And, those guys are, you got hosting companies that can make, y'all can make enough money to survive and pay y'all's bills. Podcasters, May not be me, I'm making a fortune, but those guys are making some good money too. But the podcast app developers really have been left to sell their stuff for in-app purchases or 99 cents on an app store for years. And so, like, to clarify the way that works and the way this gets them into the flow of so that they can make a living also is that the podcast apps essentially will be the same as they are now, but they become a wallet. So basically, they are they just strap on a Bitcoin wallet to themselves.
A very smart wallet.
Yeah, they put a Lightning wallet function into their app, so that now I can transfer some Bitcoin over to my podcast app from Cash App or PayPal or wherever I'm getting my Bitcoin from. I send some Bitcoin over to my podcast player. And now I see that this favorite podcast that I'm listening to supports the value block, and it shows a Lightning payment address. And I just say, oh yeah, I'll give them $1 an hour that I listen to, and it just boom, boom, boom. It just starts happening in the background. So basically, that's the idea, is that podcast players, podcast apps become wallets.
So we've been working with Paul and Evan from Sphinx Chat, and you'll see Paul show up on podcastindex.social for sure. And the vibe in the Bitcoin development community is very analogous to podcasting. And I'll sum it up with something Paul said to us. He said, there should be no billionaires coming out of this. Everybody should be able to make money, fair, compete on features, compete on price, compete on speed, whatever it is. If anyone walks out a billionaire because they've siloed something, then we fucked it up. We did something wrong. What I love about it is all the code is made available. It's updated. It's fresh. They cannot single-handedly do this. We can't single-handedly do this. We've got to drive adoption. And getting this value block into the next phase of the namespace, but just developing with it now at a point where I think we've got a lot of excitement, a lot of momentum, where people are now seeing, hey, we've got these great features, but if you use my tool, you got tags over here. If you use that tool, you got tags over there. Now, all of a sudden, we have a reason to expand the ecosystem and have these podcaster hubs, which will allow for these community features to not only happen in a way that is completely anonymous, completely secure, is cryptographically insured for trust, but also provides built-in spam protection, because you could make things very expensive for somebody trying to spam if you're just charging little amounts. That's always, if an email cost you 1 cent, there would be no spammers anymore. So that's kind of built into the protocol. Tom, I hear you tapping away on your keyboard. Are you sending a message to have me arrested, or what are you doing?
I'm Googling some of this stuff. I've not heard a lot of this. The Lightning nodes and
Tom,
go ahead, Tom.
Kevin.
I was just saying that I was looking at different Lightning nodes and what it takes to integrate with one. Because as the host side, we're not a player, and so the integration on our side would be to make sure that we could provide that in the RSS feed so that the money could get routed appropriately.
As a hoster, so hosting a full node for receiving Lightning, and then there's these additional bits that Sphinx Chat has made available, and that's the chat. They have a meme server for GIFs and images, etc. And again, all of this rides on the blockchain. It's really phenomenal because you can join in just with your public key. I mean, it is very, very exciting. So all of that stuff, all those services are built within the LND node, which is the Lightning node, and there's an obvious cost per month to host that, which could be something that you guys could provide in that manner. But I think I'll leave that up to you, because obviously any podcaster could set up their own node. I mean, I have one at home, and I could do my own node services, but that's me. And I also do my own RSS feed. So I'm not your typical guy.
Yeah, I think the thing to Lightning, if you're only partially familiar with Bitcoin, then Lightning is going to make your head explode. I mean, I'll just go ahead and say that. I mean, it is once somebody explains it to you, it makes perfect sense. It's not magic and it's not a mystery, but it's just, it really is a head twister when you first sort of get familiar with it, because it allows Bitcoin. The problem with Bitcoin now is that the transaction time is so long and the fees are so expensive. So, I mean, you can take, the fees are large if you want something less than a 6-hour confirmation time to send Bitcoin from one wallet to another. Lightning solves that by making all the transactions off chain, so that the transactions get sent in real time in small amounts for no fee or very little fee, and then all those transactions are batched together later and then brought back on chain at one time, so that you have
it's a mind fees. It's a mind F. I mean, it's impossible to explain in words, and honestly, for the podcaster and for the listener, it shouldn't be difficult. All it is put money in the top, press play. That's it. And then enjoy all the features that come along with that.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do is just put the plumbing together to make it all flow, because and I say plumbing, I mean like the plumbing in the decentralized plumbing that goes through all of RSS and that kind of thing, because the way that this will get adoption is when people begin to have nodes available to them and that kind of thing, which is not hard. I mean, I have a node. Adam's running his node. The Sphinx Chat guys, they spin up nodes for you. These services are out there. But it is very new, and so this is a long-term vision that we have. But when I say long-term, I mean I think that this. I'm not talking 5 years long term. I mean, I'm talking about 6 months long term.
Well, I mean, this thing is
already, other transactions would take place like that, right? Yeah, decentralized and
right. Well, so and we're going to get you guys access to the app so you can see it in action. We have like 2 or 3 podcasts that we've enabled this way, and the whole process is really, you look at this, and you're like, this is a whole new podcasting app. And my hope has always been that, these two worlds, we have hundreds, if not thousands of wallets. Everyone's got a wallet, and you can use it as a point of sale. It's got a little, I can use it like I'm charging people money, and then, like a little credit card thing, or you can click on marketplace, you can go buy server space or some wires or solder or whatever. It's not a lot of things. It's not like an Amazon. You can also, cash your Bitcoin in for gift cards, which you can then use on Amazon. But wait until these guys see the podcasting opportunity. They're going to turn their wallets into podcast apps. And I think that we have this interesting, I hope to see some cross collaboration too. I think we have an interesting mix of podcast app developers and wallet developers, and we can come together and we can create some kick-ass stuff.
And it doesn't have to be, another beauty of this thing is it does not in any way exclude traditional advertising-based funding.
No.
I mean, you can continue to have ads and do whatever you want to, but then you also drop this thing into your feed, and that enables Lightning-aware podcast apps to begin to send you money on a streaming basis, and that's an extra source of income that can give you protection from possibly being deplatformed.
Can you guys help me understand the difference between a node and a wallet?
Yeah, the node is the back end, just to make it simple. So the wallet holds your keys, has all the logic in it. But your wallet is on your phone. Typically, it's not going to be online 24/7. So you need what they call a watchtower. So there's a little process running in on the server that is making sure you're receiving, whatever needs to be done, so that when you reconnect your wallet, you can then see how much money you've received, but you can also make payments and do other things. So the node is, am I saying that right, Dave? The node is basically your always on presence.
Yeah, the node is what is communicating. The Lightning node is what's communicating with the Bitcoin client at all times in order to manage connections between the Lightning network and the Bitcoin network, and open and close channels and do all this kind of stuff. And the wallet is just it's almost a virtual construct on top of that, just so that you can see your money and make transactions and that kind of thing.
And use the node for chat and other things.
Yeah. The Lightning LND is the main implementation. There's a couple of others, C Lightning, but I think LND may be the only one that supports key send right now.
Yeah.
So does everybody who wants to be able to send currency through Lightning need their own node, or can you share nodes?
No, there's actually there's a lot of node providers, or as they call Lightning service providers, and Breeze, Breeze, seems to be leading the pack right now, and they have code on GitHub, and they have pretty much a full Lightning node running on the wallet, and I believe they have a watchtower in the background that they provide to people. So they have, kind of like a split service, but you hold your keys in your wallet, and they have enabled key send payments from that. So you really just need whatever infrastructure they're providing to send your payments to any receiving node. The receiving node really needs to be on all the time. With your Breeze wallet, you reconnect. It's resyncing. It resyncs real fast. It's a neutrino wallet. So it as Dave was explaining, it grabs a much smaller slice of the blockchain to make sure it has payment confirmation. But it can't receive. I can't do key send receive unless it's online. So that's just basically not functional. So in order to receive, you need the node, the full node. To send, it can be just a temporary client that has enough knowledge to make those payments when connected.
Yeah, it's an interesting, what we've been working with the Sphinx guys with. They provide nodes, and they also had the Sphinx app.
Yeah,
and so it was a good combination because they could provide both in order for us to do this proof of concept. Let's see if this thing even works type of deal. And because they had an app that they essentially turned their their Lightning wallet app
into a podcast app
in the course of about a month. And so that kind of tells you what that entails. I mean, it tells you how. I don't want to use the word simple because it is not simple, but what I'm trying to say is it tells you that it's not, there's a good integration there that exists already. Now the node hosting is something that is just going to be a learning curve. And I think the Sphinx guys will be happy to lend their expertise.
Yeah, Paul is going to be on the Mastodon server as much as he can, and we'll have pointers and all kinds of stuff for anybody who's interested. Evan is one of their developers. I don't know if he'll have time, but he'll certainly be available. And what we'd like to do is right after we're done here, Kevin and Tom, we'd like to get you suited up on the app and walk through it with us, so you have a little better idea, and then you can explain to the next guy how it works.
Yeah. So, I think I have my head wrapped around the vision. The implementation part is still a little fuzzy, but that'll get clearer.
Yeah.
But the vision, right? I should be able to open up my podcast app player of choice. So let's say it's Podfriend, and I've got this digital currency, Lightning something or other.
It's basically Bitcoin.
Okay. And I say, hey, I want to pay $10 a month to my favorite podcasters.
Yep.
Right. So the first of every month, go ahead and drop $10 in my Podfriend wallet.
Yep.
And then configure PodFriend that says, hey, for the first, I got $10 a month coming in here. So, and I want to do $1 a minute for the first 600 minutes of podcasts I listen to in PodFriend every month. Dish that out to my favorite podcast. And
exactly.
That's it.
Exactly. That's it. And then while you're doing that, you're supporting everybody all the way down the chain. You're supporting the app you're using, PodFriend. You're supporting the Index, and anything else that the podcaster. And this is kind of, as a podcaster, I really like this feature that automatically half of it can go to my co-host, and it goes straight to my co-host wallet. We don't have to have any conversation about it after that. 10% can go to my investors who supported me in getting my gear, etc. And that is all control. That's all completely transparent in two ways. One is you don't see it happening, but you do get all the receipts for it. But you can see it all goes in one fell swoop. And that it's amazing. We have that part actually working.
And it's like also transparent, right? If I'm understanding it, is because you could always view the source of the RSS feed, and there's that value documentation right there that's showing you how it's being distributed.
That's exactly right, and that's why we put if you go through the Index to get when we start exposing the value block stuff that we aggregate, if we expose it through the API, we'll have our split in there at 1%, and that's for the same thing, transparency. We're just asking for essentially a donation, and that would be something that a hoster could do. You could say, well, here's your feed. You're producing the feed, and then you have a node. Buzzsprout has a Lightning node that's sitting there, and you say, okay, well, you can we produce your feed, and we're going to add our 1% to your value block, and so we get a piece of 1% of that as well. And maybe it's a sliding scale. I mean, there's a market for it, so who knows what those prices are supposed to be right now. But the other thing, but it's like you said, yes, it's all transparent. It's right there in the XML feed. You can see it all. You see where the money's going. And the other thing, though, that's not to complicate things, but is a little you thinking beyond the digital currency part of it, is that. And one of the reasons why Adam had the idea of doing it on a minute-by-minute basis instead of just as lump sums is because this gives you insight into what's happening during the playing of your app. Playing of your episode. I mean, if all of a sudden you start seeing payments drop off at a certain point in your episode, and of course it's Bitcoin, so it's all anonymous anyway. There's no user exposure, but it can give you insight into, well, maybe that's not a very good part of your episode. So or if people begin to give you boost payments, they're like, oh, bing, 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 this was great. Well, maybe that informs you in a different way. Oh, well, that they like that segment. So, it has more than just a funding function. It's also a very valuable information tool when you're having sequenced payments coming in on a minute-by-minute basis.
And I will mention that in all this testing, and we've had the money at a very low level, so I'm getting, what is one Satoshi is 1/100th of a penny, I think. Just to see that streaming in, I'm looking at this log and in an app on my phone, like, oh, boom, boom, boom. And so I know that someone's listening. Now, of course, it's either Dave or Evan or Paul, and they're developing and they're testing, but it's exciting. It doesn't matter how much it is. Like, oh my God! So I can actually see listeners coming in. It's an incredible experience.
Yeah, and you're not having to rely on IAB certified download stats and all this kind of stuff.
None of that.
Yeah,
right.
First impressions?
That's a mind bender, man.
I may have said that once or twice myself.
Yeah. It took me quite a while. I've been harping on this for a while. Say digital money, and I don't care if it's Bitcoin or a FedNow digital dollar or a digital euro. You got to think differently about it, and you can. Especially this.
Yeah. Well,
go ahead.
There has to be a way, right, for an open ecosystem, like what am I calling it? Like a protocol instead of a platform, being able to distribute money, because we want to be able to support our podcasters. I'm happy to give, Netflix my $12 a month, but how do I give my, 10 or 15 favorite podcasters my $12
Well,
a month?
this is the example that I like the most, because what we're seeing now, after everyone being home a lot for Corona, Miss Rona paying her visit, is, you're paying, $15 for Netflix, $15 for Hulu. You got your Amazon purchases. And of course, you really only use a few from each of these silos. Whereas the way we look at it is you determine what you want to listen to, and you route right around or right through those silos into however people are, in whatever app people are listening in, and you determine where your money goes. There should be no reason. And by the way, Spotify can easily put this into their system if they're interested in it. Easily. Wouldn't hurt me.
Hold for laughter.
Seriously.
Yeah, what'd you say?
I said hold for laughter. I don't know that.
No, but I'm just saying that it's that open.
Yeah. We would all love that, right? I don't know that. I don't know.
Yeah.
I feel very optimistic.
The bottom line is it doesn't matter. I'm not making money off of Spotify. It comes directly from the producers who produce the show. People figured out Patreon. So I really don't have any doubt that if people like the concept, which is pledging, here's what I'm going to pay for my listening, and instead of $100 at the end of the month, if we let the silos grow, I'll have $30 at the end of the month, and that's what I spend on my podcast. And oh, by the way, if I run out, I can just feel bad about it and not care, right. Or I can top it up. It doesn't matter. It won't stop your listening experience.
Yeah. Here's the thing is that like Spotify and Apple Podcasts, these are not great podcasting apps anyway.
Nope, they're not.
The reality is once you become a podcast fan, you're probably going to
find something else.
Yep. Right?
Yep.
And especially if you get podcasters who start talking about this, like, hey, this show isn't free for me to produce. There's this way that you can support me and other podcasts you love, and it's available in these apps, and they're excellent apps. So if you're discovering this show here or here that doesn't support that, I would encourage you to check this out. Like if we can start getting that message out, you absolutely don't need a Spotify to adopt something like this because, again, podcast fans will find dedicated apps.
Well, I can't wait to start pushing this on my shows because I think people will give it a shot. And again, we only need 1%. You get 1%, then all of a sudden we've got the pump is primed and stuff is moving through, and who knows who will come in with another idea. I mean, this is the beauty of it. We don't have all the answers. We spent an inordinate amount of time trying to get a demo together because I know if anyone listening to this is probably scratching their head like, how the what the huh? So I'm going to post this PDF on podcastindex.social. And so when we put the show up so people can see that. And if you guys can hang on, then we'd like to guide you through, get you up and running so you can take a look at this in action. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Yeah.
All right. Tom, Kevin, the Buzzsprouters, thank you so much for being with us on this seminal episode of Podcasting 2.0, episode number 10. Dave, thank you for coming from your deathbed and your airlock. I know that you've... How long will you continue to be quarantined there? Another week or so?
I'm going to be locked in my bedroom for an additional 5 days. So I'm going to. That's what I was telling Adam earlier. My family's on one side of the house. There's a hallway, and then I'm in my bedroom on the other side of the house. So there's like this. It's like the space airlock between us, It's like my wife will drop like lunch into the hallway and shut the door and just like, just get.
Well, there could not be a better time to start exposing people to something when you've got lots of time on your hands, Dave. You can just sit at home on your deathbed and watch along as it all starts to unfold.
Yeah, watching. That's what I'm good at right now.
All right, everybody. I'm sure we'll have a lot more to talk about next week. Again, thanks to Tom and Kevin from Buzzsprout. Check them out at buzzsprout.com. Podcasting 2.0 will return next Friday, and we'll see if we can push this thing to yet another level. See you then, everybody. Take care.